In the 1850s, the USA didn't exist in the form it does today. And the 14th president, Franklin Pierce, wanted to buy some land on the west coast of America to add to the newly growing states. Hearing that he wanted to do this, a local chieftain, Chief Seattle, drafted a letter to the president, and here's a couple of points he made. One, the president in Washington sends words that he wishes to buy our land. How can you buy or sell the sky? The land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Towards the end of the letter, he says, "This we know. The earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us. Man did not weave the web of life. He's merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself." So as far back as 1850, Chief Seattle was recognizing the role that we play in interacting with the earth and in caring for the earth. The rest of this video is just going to examine some of these ideas of our place in the land and whether or not we can own it. It's May, it's a gorgeous day, and I've come out into the Dorset countryside just to talk a little bit about the relationship between human beings, our species, and the environment. Just over my shoulder here you can see a small rise in the ground. That's a Bronze Age burial mound. They're called barrows, and they were built around about 1500 BC, somewhere between 2000 and 1500 BC. They're burial places. It's where people living in this landscape at that time would bury their dead, and it's no coincidence that it stands out on that little bit of horizon there. They were built to be seen. They are there to say, this is our land, this is where we come from. Our dead are here, we've been here for a long time, so this is ours. Now, I didn't choose this spot by accident, because what I'm standing on here, I don't know if you can see behind me these bushes stretching away. Those mark the sides of a Roman road, and that Roman road stretches all the way from at least Dorchester. It probably goes as far as Weymouth, and it goes all the way up to London. It's known as the Portway. It goes around the north of London and would ultimately have linked to Colchester, which was the Roman capital of Britain. It's absolutely no coincidence that the Roman road is in such close proximity to this barrow here and some other barrows in the field behind me here. The Romans were making a statement. When they arrived, they were addressing the Britons at that time and saying, this may have been your land, but it's ours now. However, it wasn't the people of Bronze Age Britain who were the first to claim this sort of landscape. For that, we need to look a little bit further away. So if we look a bit further in distance and a little bit further back in time, you can see evidence of the first people in this country who claimed this landscape. Over in the distance, on the top of that far ridge, just below those trees, you can probably see a low green mound. That mound, when it was built, would have been white on the sides with chalk, and it was designed to stand out in the landscape. It was built by Neolithic people, sometimes referred to as people of the New Stone Age, and they were the first people after the Ice Age to come to this country to start to clear the forest that covered most of Britain and to start building farms. Now, were they trying to tame the environment, or were they trying to live as one with the environment? We'll probably never know that. But again, that mound that you see, that burial mound, would have been the resting place for generations probably from the same family group. And it was designed to be seen. It was a statement. This is our land, we're here. This is our land. This is your land. This is our Okay, behind me you can see more evidence of this idea of different groups of people coming into the country and laying their visions of the landscape on top of other people. This clump of trees, which is to your left of my head, marks the position of the Great Barrow. It's the largest Bronze Age burial mound in Dorset. But this was reused in the 4th and 5th centuries by the Anglo-Saxons when they first turned up. So the first people we could loosely describe as English. And they implanted some of their own burials in the side of that mound, possibly saying, this is our land too. And that barrow lies on the edge of what we call a henge monument. You would have all heard of Stonehenge. This is Knowlton Henge. It's the central one of 3 henges that were built here, but the only one that still survives. And a henge is effectively a large enclosure, a ditch with a bank outside it, used to enclose a section of landscape. Now what we're not sure is, was that done to keep something in, or perhaps it was done to keep something out? We'll never know. This is our land. This is your land. So as you can see, this Bronze Age monument was again visited by another group of people. Rome was back, but this time in a different form. So it wasn't the Roman Empire this time, it was the Church of Rome. And in the 6th century, Pope Gregory sent St. Augustine to Britain to try and convert the people to Christianity. And one of the directives he gave was to adopt what he referred to as pagan sites and try to make them Christian, try to get people to accept this new religion. Now again, these sites were all prominent in the landscape, and so things like this church had to be prominent. So they built it right in the middle of the old Bronze Age, late Neolithic henge monument. So here at Knowlton Church we can see we've had successive groups of people have arrived, have each staked their claim to the land, each with different traditions, but each claiming the same entitlement to that land. Now, one thing we don't know about is what were the morals of many of these groups of people. And certainly we know the morality of the early Christian groups, but before that it's a lot more uncertain. And what sort of ethical codes were they living by? How did they treat the land? Was it seen as something for them to do whatever they want with, or was this something that they felt they had to treat with respect? There are differing views, different opinions. There's just one last thing I want to show you on this little tour to do with traditions and how things get adapted, and that's over my shoulder behind me here, and it's that tree. It's a yew tree, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. So the yew tree I was just telling you about sits on the edge of the henge with the church in the background there, and yew trees are very often associated with churchyards, burial grounds, and they're seen as symbolizing eternal life, resurrection, because yew trees are incredibly long-lived, and they can generate themselves as trees, as branches grow outwards. If they touch the ground, they can throw out new roots and spawn new trees. But what you'll see with this one is people have chosen to decorate it. There are ribbons and all sorts of other tokens hanging from it. And this is a tradition that predates Christianity, but it also links to death. Many modern pagans or people with an interest in earth powers or what they call Wicca have taken to visiting yew trees, and this is a tradition that's thousands of years old. And they will hang these tokens in the yew tree in remembrance of the dead and in the hope of an eternal life. This practice dates way back to the Druids in the Iron Age, so before the Romans ever turned up, but it's still growing strong. And part of the reason that yew trees are included in Christian cemeteries now was part of this idea that Pope Gregory had of adopting the traditions of the area they were moving into and adapting them to Christianity. So it's not at all uncommon to visit a Christian cemetery, find a yew tree, but also to find these pre-Christian tokens being left by people who visit and just want to remember their relatives. I'm walking along another section of the Roman road I showed you earlier. It's much harder to make out here. It's just more like a hump in the ground, but there's a definite course that goes on for miles. But what you can see here, this side of me with the trees on top, is the massive fortress, Iron Age fortress of Badbury Ring. Again, huge statement in the landscape. These were Iron Age people just before the Roman invasion, so about 500 or 600 BC, making a statement: this is our land, leave it alone. So 3 more barrows behind me here. Again, statement of ownership of land. I hope I've shown you with these few sites that we visited that people's claims to land go back as long as they're people, and they have found different ways to do it. But monuments in a landscape are a particularly effective way of staking a claim. Now, this idea of land ownership is intensely political. Wars have been and are still being fought over land. You will hear religious groups claiming to be chosen people. You'll hear of promised lands in different religious traditions. Politically, even in British politics, the Liberal Democrats, the Liberal Party as was in the early 20th century, had an anthem called The Land, in which they claimed that God gave land to the people and that it was our right to own it. In the 1930s, American folk singer Woody Guthrie recorded a song called This Land, in which he said, "This land belongs to you and me." And you'll still hear that song sung across the USA. It's very much part of American folk culture. So once we go beyond this issue of who owns the land, the next question that we really have to try and resolve is, what do we do with it?